The reading today is very short, and the topic is how to be a true friend. And from Living Wisely, Living Well, don't ask more of others than you would ask of yourself. This week is the anniversary of the passing of leaving the body of Swami Kriyananda. And in many ways it's very poignant. I was wryly observing that when we have the anniversaries of the Mahasamadhi of our line of Gurus, Yogananda and Sri Yukteswarji and others, it's more of a celebration. But it's still too close for many of us who knew Swamiji. It's still only a year. And sometimes I think the human heart fails to keep up with our spiritual ideals. I sometimes tease the one who created us that they did a poor job with designing the human heart because, again, it fails when we lose someone like Swamiji, who really was the model and the ideal of true friendship. In the early years of Ananda, he very often would say, and I heard this less over time because of his role, I suppose, but very often people would call him a teacher or they would try to put him too high on a pedestal. And he would say very quietly and simply, and again I heard this very often, he would respond by saying, I am not really your teacher, just see me as your friend. And that's how he was driven in his life, was because he really wanted to serve and help everyone in the highest way. And he didn't mean a friend in a, putting your arm around your back and joking and laughing. We had laughter and joy with him also. But he meant really a friend in God, someone who was helping us to find God, someone who was helping us to find our highest potential in life, whether it was as a parent or a teacher, a musician, an artist. He was there to help everyone unconditionally. He really was the model and the ideal of today's subject, how to be a true friend. A reporter once asked Swamiji, they asked him, why do so many people love you? And Swamiji's response was very simple. He said, perhaps it's because I love them. And this is really, true friendship is not in how we act necessarily, although our actions will spring forth in the right way if we are a true friend to someone. It really is, as Swamiji often said about the path of Kriya Yoga and the technique of Kriya, he said to practice it from the inside out. And in the same way, friendship, if you develop love for people, if you develop selflessness, the desire to give to others, your friendship will start expressing itself in the right way. You will be able to start helping people to achieve their goals, to just feel loved, to feel supported. And so, true friendship springs from the heart. In the heart, I'm not talking about just the human heart, although it is expressed in human ways. But really, it's the heart that's going towards God, that wants to help others to find God. And Swamiji again expressed this really in perfection. How do we, one, follow that example, but that answer of following that example of true friendship also answers the question of how do we bring Swami Kriyananda closer into our hearts? Because I know that many of us miss him. And I know many of us also feel his presence very, very, very strongly, even, I would say, more strongly than ever. And I think it's because Swamiji imbued in us this desire to help others, to serve others, to be their friend, rather than just seeing him as one individual who passed across this screen of duality that has billions and billions of souls. And we saw him as something that was much more than a personality, but also the ideal of true friendship. And this is how we bring Swami Kriyananda closer and closer, even though he has left the body, closer into our lives, is by, in a sense, being Swami Kriyananda. We can be his hands and feet, we can be his heart. When we serve others in the way that he served all of us, and many of those of us who knew him, we can also learn how to feel that same bliss, that same divine love, that same freedom and joy that he had. Because in a sense, what really drew people to him was that unconditional love that he had for others, this extraordinary divine joy that he had, and we too can feel that by following his example of serving others and giving to others. Now, friendship, Yogananda, he said that of all the human relationships, he said that friendship is the highest of all of them, because he said other human relationships have some compulsion and duty attached to them. He said that the mother and child relationship, for example, there is some duty from the mother to the child and from the child to the mother, and same with sibling relationships and husband and wife. But he said friendship is the purest because it is simply the expression of one soul to another, giving to another unconditionally and freely for no reason except to share and to give. I had a very interesting example of this just 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, the last few weeks. I have an older brother who I received a message from him, and he has been fighting cancer for the last few years. And the message I got was that he was getting close to leaving the body. He was rather quiet about this among his siblings. I think some of the siblings were a little annoyed that he waited so long to let us know that it had gotten so far, but he did. And my own relationship to him was not so much as the typical brother relationship, because he was much older than I. He was 10 years older than myself. And so my older siblings, another brother and sister, had more of that close brother and sister relationship that had some of that compulsion and duty and also emotion from the hurts and the trials and the tests and the more human love that siblings might have who are very close to each other. I was more of a friend to this older brother. And I think it's why he called out to me. He had never been interested in meditation in his life, and so he called out to me of all our siblings. He wanted to learn some meditation from me because, as he put it, he had a little bit of anxiety about leaving the body because he knew it was coming close. And what was interesting was that he didn't ask someone who was closer to him, who had that compulsion and emotion. And so I drove 6 hours almost the next day to go visit him, and I saw him, and we had the most delightful visit. It was really very free of sentiment and emotion, and it was really just two close and dear friends, one of them about to go on a long journey and asking my advice about what he should pack on his journey and what he should leave behind. And we talked about what it meant to leave the body, and he was very curious because he didn't live a deep spiritual life, but he led a good and victorious life. And so we talked about such things, again, just as one friend to another, without the overwhelming emotion and sentiment that would normally be involved. And he was very eager. It was very interesting to see him want to learn meditation at the end. I think his life was about other victories that he needed to achieve, and this learning meditation at the end was just a prelude, perhaps, to his next lifetime. I taught him Hong Sa, and he picked it up just like a yogi. It was actually quite striking to see. Within minutes, he was sitting meditating, and his eyes were half open and locked up with a spiritual eye, totally still. And it was like he had been practicing this all his life. And then just a week later, he left the body. And I think that this was an example of friendship that was, in a sense, higher than what could have been achieved just from the compulsion and duty of these other relationships that Yogananda talked about. And so friendship, true friendship in God, which is what we're talking about today, is really about helping each other to find divine freedom, to achieve the next spiritual level that we can achieve. And it comes very, very simply through giving to others. When people ask sometimes, I sometimes hear from people that they're lonely and that they don't have friends, and this isn't common. It's more people who are not necessarily part of Ananda because we have so many friends at Ananda. But my advice is always the same. If you want to have divine friends, then you must learn to give friendship to others. And that's really the answer, is just to give, and give. This was Swami Kriyananda's example again. This was the example of true friendship, which is very simply giving unconditionally to others. And when you give unconditionally over the weeks, the months, the years, over the course of a lifetime, you will find something very interesting happens. That is that you start to create a very strong magnetism in yourself that starts to attract true divine friends. Sometimes people are afraid of giving unconditionally because they're afraid of being taken advantage of. Swamiji addressed this in some of his writings, and he gave an example where when he was teaching meditation and yoga in the very early days of Ananda, he was having to earn money to essentially buy the Ananda property, and it was a real struggle for him financially. But when he gave classes, he would charge a fee, but if someone couldn't afford it, they would do some volunteer work. They would bake cookies or set up the room. And he said there was this one couple who was in such a case they couldn't afford to pay for the class, and so he had them do some setup for it. And then you heard them talking about a very expensive trip that they were just about to make, and he realized that of course they could afford for the class, but they just didn't want to pay. And his mind understood that in one sense they were taking advantage of his own heart's generosity, but he also realized that he wasn't doing this just for them. He was also doing it for himself, in the sense that it was very important for him to give completely unconditionally to others without the thought of return for himself. And when we have that attitude towards giving, towards service to others, towards love to others, then we create again this very strong spiritual magnetism, because it's a very spiritual act. You can also have this attitude towards your own siblings and spouses and these other relationships that we were talking about. If you're married, try to see your husband or your wife not just as a husband or wife, but as a friend. And again, as a friend in God, someone who you're serving, you're helping unconditionally to find their highest potential, supporting them in their spiritual efforts, giving to them in that way, loving them that way. And you will find that that bond of divine friendship that's created through two people sharing and giving to each other becomes very, very magnetic and is really a very, very deep spiritual quality. And I would almost say divine friends are perhaps the greatest spiritual boon that one can receive. I'm going to read something shortly from Paramahansa Yogananda about this. But he gave a great deal of emphasis to this attitude, this aspect, and to this quality of divine friendship and divine friends. That's the beauty of Ananda. Ananda village here in California, we have 250 residents here or so, and we have Ananda spiritual family, we call it, all over the world. And the beauty of Ananda is that we are all spiritual friends helping each other. And there's an unconditional helping here that's so very sweet and beautiful. Sometimes people, when they visit Ananda and they might think about moving to a place like this, sometimes they're a little tentative about moving to a spiritual community, because they think that if they're not spiritual enough and they're living in this sort of village where everyone sees what everyone is doing, I think they're a little tentative and concerned that they might be judged by not being quite as spiritual as others. And I always assure them that the beauty of Ananda is that when anyone ever stumbles spiritually, there are about 250 people there to pick that person up, to support them, to love them, to not judge them, but to just give their unconditional love and support. And I've seen this time and time and time again, that divine friendship really, again, it's the greatest spiritual boon, because when you have divine friends in God, you always have people to support you, to help you, to uplift you. And going the other way, there are people that you have this deep spiritual bond with, that you can give to them and grow yourself spiritually and grow, become free from your own limitations of thinking about the self. So again, the secret to true friendship is giving unconditionally, not in a human way, but in a divine way, touching others with the love of God, touching others with your spiritual support. Sometimes people just need a little bit of divine joy and cheer when they're going through a struggle. And you'll find that divine friends essentially are these souls lifting each other up to God. There was a member at Ananda who had a very interesting dream. And Swami Kriyananda said this was a true dream that this person had. That there was Ananda members, friends, in a circle holding hands, and they were singing a song and just having a spiritual satsang in the circle holding hands. And every once in a while, one of them would suddenly lift up off the ground and take off and become liberated. And it was not necessarily, quote, the most spiritual one who would be their turn to take off and be liberated. It was essentially all these souls helping each other to become free. And one by one, these individuals became free. And this is really a good image to hold of what a spiritual family like Ananda is. This is a good image to hold of what a group of divine friends are, is that we're just helping each other to become free. And in our own service to others, we also become free. This is something that Paramahansa Yogananda said about friendship. He said, "Friendship is the universal spiritual attraction which unites souls in the bond of divine love and may manifest itself either in two or in many. To have friends, you must manifest friendliness. If you open the door to the magnetic power of friendship, a soul or souls of like vibrations will be attracted to you. The more friendly you become towards all, the greater will be the number of your real friends. Friendship is a manifestation of God's love for you, expressed through your friends." So don't take this idea of friendship lightly. It really is truly an important part of the spiritual path. It's an important part of our own growth, to be a friend to all, the way Swami Kriyananda was a friend to all. I was struck by my own relationship with Swamiji, and I would say that he was my closest friend in all this world. And then I thought that he was probably many hundreds of people's in this world, their closest friend. And I think many thousands would say that he was a close friend. And how does someone become such a close friend to so many, many people? Again, it's through that magnetic quality of the heart's natural love to give to others. And in that way, that's how we can feel him closer, but really to be like him. Really what's attracting us to a great soul like that is that magnetic power of divine love and unconditional giving. And when we express that quality, we bring him closer, but really we draw ourselves closer to the real source of that magnetism that he had. Another interesting thing that Paramahansa Yogananda taught was to actually consciously seek out divine friends in this lifetime. I've never heard anyone take this very interesting approach that he did, because he said that in past lifetimes we develop magnetism and divine friendship with souls that we continue to develop lifetime after lifetime. And he said that most people, or many people, are too restless to recognize those souls from past lives. And he actually gave some importance to looking for those souls, recognizing them, and continuing this beautiful dance of divine friendship in this lifetime with them, because it's an important aspect of our own spiritual growth. Here's the way he put it. He said, "There are others who give you the instantaneous feeling that you have known them always. This indicates that they are your friends of previous incarnations. Do not neglect them, but strengthen the friendship existing between you. Be on the lookout for them always, as your restless mind may fail to recognize them. Often they are very near you, drawn by the friendship born in the dim, distant past. They constitute your shining collection of soul jewels. Add to it constantly. In these bright soul galaxies, you will behold the one great friend smiling at you, radiantly and clearly. It is God who comes to you in the guise of a noble, true friend to serve, inspire, and guide you." So perhaps sometime in the next couple weeks, or just have this on your mind during these next couple of weeks. 1, be on the lookout for divine friends. In fact, Swamiji often told us that anyone who crosses your path in this life, in even trivial ways, but especially in meaningful ways, are people who you've been connected to or had a connection with in past lifetimes. So be on the lookout for these significant connections that you have. Also experiment during these next few weeks with this aspect and this quality of divine friendship in terms of giving to others naturally, easily, freely, those who are close to you, those who are already your spiritual friends. Don't take these relationships for granted. They really, as Yogananda said, he called them our soul jewels that we can collect and develop a great magnetism, and he called them galaxies in a sense, because a great spiritual family of divine friends, like many of us have with Ananda, really are, again, a great boon that can help us to become greatly spiritual advanced through the power of divine love and the power of divine giving. There's also a reading from the Bhagavad Gita that I'm going to read here. And this really touches on something that Yogananda often taught. When we pray, and the prayer that he sort of gave to us was to pray to the different aspects of God. He taught us to pray to God as the Heavenly Father, the Divine Mother, the friend, and the beloved. Even though friend and beloved are together, they're two separate but related connections that we have to God. And he said that develop this relationship with God, especially as a friend. And this is what we have from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, stanza 3. Krishna is saying to Arjuna, "Today I have taught you, my devotee and friend, that ancient science of yoga, the secret to the highest blessings for mankind." Swamiji, in his book Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, when he explains this particular stanza, he picks up and touches on this quality of God as the true friend. Swamiji writes, "It is a thought wondrous to contemplate. As the devotee advances spiritually, he is accepted by the Lord himself, not only as a devotee, but as a friend. The relationship with God as friend is in some ways the sweetest. For even the thought of God as mother, which many consider the sweetest of all relationships, carries a hint of the human presumption that God must take care of us and pardon all our sins. As Yogananda taught people to pray, 'Mother, naughty or good, I am thy child, thou must release me.' When one is advanced enough, however, to think of God as friend, there steals into the heart that sweet confidence by which one feels, 'But of course, you love me. I am yours, you are mine. How could either of us ever turn away from the other? We are one.'" Also later in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, stanza 29, Krishna also again touches on this aspect of God as divine friend. He says, "He finds peace who knows me as the enjoyer of all offerings and austerities, as the infinite Lord of creation, and as the dearest friend of all." So one way to develop this quality of true friendship is to, again, as I mentioned earlier, work on it from the inside out rather than from the outside in. Meaning, don't just work on your actions and what you do, but develop the quality in your meditation relating to God as the friend. And when you relate to God as the truest friend, you understand what true friendship is. It's purely the unconditional love and giving, the dearest relationship of all, this connection between the soul and the infinite that is infinitely vast and loving in that sense, but also is personal in a sense, not so much in the human way, but in the fact that the Lord of the universe loves each one of us individually and is our dearest friend of all and wants the highest for us, which is infinite freedom, infinite bliss. And when we give our friendship to the Lord of the universe, who Yogananda said, somewhat wryly I think, but very truly, he said that people think that by giving great donations to God they will please God, or by saying just the right, properly pronounced slokas or prayers or words, that they will please God. But as he often said, God is already in all of those things, that God, the Lord of the universe, is in everything. And he said often that God is everything and has everything except for one thing. He said that the Lord of the universe is longing for the one thing that it doesn't have, which is our unconditional love and giving. And so he said that's the most pleasing of all to the Lord. Krishna, whatever your Ishta Devata, to the Guru, to God, is to give our unconditional love and friendship, but also know and trust that we are also loved unconditionally, that God is yearning to give to us, but we are not always receptive. So be receptive in meditation, but also give your love unconditionally. And just this comes back to really the highest aspect of friendship, which is this unconditional giving. I had an interesting experience of this many years ago. In the early years of Ananda in the 1970s, we had a monastery here, in which I was part of when I moved to Ananda as a young man. And we had very, very long meditations and very, very strong sadhana. And I went through a period about a year or two after I moved to Ananda and really started earnestly meditating and on this path, where my meditations were very, very, very dry. And it lasted for quite a long time. It lasted for a year or more. And I would come to meditation every morning and every evening because, again, we had a strong group meditation and for at least a few hours every day, and we would have a 5-hour meditation every Saturday morning. And I started thinking that I might as well bring in the newspaper to read with me, because at least I would make some use of my time there, because I wasn't getting anything from it. And I felt like something in me told me I was wasting my time, but of course I knew that I wasn't. I just knew intuitively that I just wasn't quite getting it yet. And so one day in meditation, I just had a shift in my consciousness, because I realized that I was thinking all along that I'm not getting anything from this. And I realized that it was from a wrong attitude, which was, what am I getting out of this? And this shift occurred, and I realized that I need to start thinking of what I can give, not what I am getting. And I realized I know that God is everything and God doesn't need anything, but I still understood that my wrong attitude of thinking of what am I getting out of this was harming me and holding me back. And so from that meditation, I opened my eyes, looked at our masters, prayed to God as Divine Mother, and I said, I give you my love. And even though that love was only just a fairly, barely flickering flame in my heart, I gave that little bit to God and to the Gurus. And from that moment on, my meditations changed. And it was simply by shifting my consciousness from what I was receiving to what I could give. My meditations changed and my spiritual life changed. And at that moment, I started feeling God's love. I started meditating more deeply. And I realized that meditation in life, when we give unconditionally and we think of giving, that's really when we open the floodgates open for God to enter our hearts and to change our life. So think in terms of giving, in terms of friendship, and you'll find that that simple act of giving to all as their divine friend will help you to become free. Namaste. It was a joy spending time with all of you today, and may God and our Gurus and the presence and example of Swami Kriyananda ji bless us always. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.